Goodness knows what o'clock it was it 9:15 and something this morning, or have joined us at Solihull factory and had that wonderful tour round the car park and inside the building, which was totally unexpected. So a big thank you to Johnny there. I'd just like to say a big thank you to everybody who's helped me put this together over the last 12 months, namely Johnny over there, who's managed to get us access into Solihull, which we've never been able to do before, so thank you, Johnny. Gary Anderson, thank you, Gary, for sorting out Speke, although for those of you who weren't at Speke, they weren't expecting us.
More security, man. Had no idea.
All these months of organisation, it just went to pot straight away. It's a great delight to be joined by Harris's family, Laura, Hannah and Nathan. So thank you very much, and their partners and their children, for coming along today and joining the event. It's great to see you. It's been fabulous to see so many different variations of the TR7 on the run. I think we've had, 5 factory sprints here? 4 or 5 factory sprints. TR8s, TR7s, a fantastic early car that Alan and Angela Lane have got as well, and who could forget Alan Hampshire's amazing 4.6 V8. So we've set aside some time this afternoon. We've got some very special speakers this afternoon for you, which I hope you'll enjoy, and a big thank you to them for coming along, and particularly to Peter Sankey, and he gave us a great insight to the buildings that are left over at Speke, what they were used for and what they're used for now. So a big thank you to Peter, who's not here with us. He didn't travel down. In a moment I'm going to hand over to John Clance, who's going to introduce our guest speakers today, but thank you everybody, each and every one of you, for making a humongous effort to be here. Thank you.
When I arrived first day, I was shown end of the assembly line, water test, and a big empty building that was going to be mine. But we have no money, and we had to meet Californian Air Resources Board restrictions, which were far worse than the federal. After a lot of problems, we did start to build. We built 38 cars on the first run. I think 4 started when they came off the assembly line. Quite a lot of bits missing. Mr. Potter, who was a plant director, which we say was a very volatile person. He came from Vauxhall. However, he had a great relationship with the Speke workforce. He understood them. And these 38 cars came off the line. I wouldn't sign them off because I didn't have the equipment to sign them off properly. So he threw a telephone at me and fired me that day, which was fine. However, he forgot things very quickly. Though these 38 cars got left and left and left in the grassed area, a deal was done. And they were all to be shipped to, they're all Californian built cars, single carburetors. They had to be shipped, and the dealers would try and rectify them. I think John knows how many actually got rectified, but 17 got rectified. However, one of the vehicles had a bird's nest in it. So Mr. Potter said, "That can't go, there's a bird's nest in it." So we left it and left it. The grass grew, the birds flew the nest, and we asked what to do with it. And he says, "Do what you like with it." And that was the first TR8. We took the vehicle into the reclamation area. We cut the back end off, made a pickup truck of it, because we needed a pickup because it was a very long factory. Begged, borrowed or stole a V8 engine. I think it was a Rover. It could have been a Stag, but I think it was a Rover. So there's your first V8. Never went on the road, of course, but we had a lot of things going on at that plant. very good. We built a lot of cars, no union troubles whatsoever, but we did have a lot of problems because there were a lot of changes going on with vehicle emissions. We didn't have the equipment. We need investment. We need what we call the sniff tester, which was a probe to go up and measure carbon monoxide and oxides of nitrogen. Why are these important? Because California, high sunshine, NOx, carbon monoxide, smog. Not smog like we know in London, but a very irritant fog, misty fog, very bad for breathing conditions. So that's why everything had to be tested, everything had to be signed off for before it was allowed to go into California first. Because that's where we built the car for first. That was for just over a year. California and federal, rest of America. There was no cars built for Britain. By the way, we say it's the 50th anniversary, but I have a document here that states not to be published before the 20th of January 1975. So that makes it 49 years. No, we'd actually built cars by then. And that's the start of the manufacturing at Speke. There's a lot of stories I could go into. If you want me to, I can. About the Gibbs girl.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you've never found that proof.
I didn't know.
We had a promo for California, and they brought the Gibbs girl over. Gibbs toothpaste. California used to have a new Gibbs girl every year. But they brought a team over. Well, Speke mentality, you know the Scouse. Everything got stolen, all the cameras got stolen. The idea was for her to go into body in white and see the first bit of her metal go onto her car, all the way through body in white, all through assembly. Problem was she went on an assembly line in a dress on the upper body, so all the airlines were underneath, cut. She has to go and get trousers, and this just went on and on and on. Then they wanted to negotiate extra pay because they were going to be film stars. So that got organised. She's back on. Next minute, cameras panning across the assembly line because she's been following this car all the way along. And two of the quality guys are walking across with polystyrene arrows sticking out from like that just across the stage. So, cut. I mean, we had so many cuts on this. And then in the end, they got everybody out of the way, panning all the vehicles with her there, walking down the line. And you went up, and someone had stuck a pair of boots way up in the ceiling. It was so funny. Then got in the car. It did start. She drove off, had to go into water test as a passenger. Someone had changed all the sequence and the fuses, so she couldn't get out. The water test continued till they got it sorted. Then she came into my area. My chief foreman, who was the guy who did all the work to get this TR8, he took her out for a trip, about 4 hours around Liverpool. And that was the story of it, and we're still trying to find what happened, but I think they scrapped it because we can't find the proof of all that went on, and the launch, because that was to coincide with the launch in California. It got sad at last. I was there for about three and a half years, and Potter, although he was a very volatile person, was, as I say, very good with the Liverpudlians. They then brought in a man called Charlie Skinner, ex-Ford, whiz kid, expert. And at the time, Leyland were doing measured day work, i.e. they had an allocated time to do their jobs. If they finished, they could sit down, play cards, couldn't go home. But they had to stay there. So first day of Charlie Skinner, he's walking around like, and he sees 4 guys playing cards. And he walks up and he bangs the table and says to them, "Don't you know who I am?" One of the guys got up and put his hand down so the others couldn't see what he'd got. Walked to the telephone, said, "Nurse, there's a guy here who doesn't know who he is. Could you send someone to look after him?" I'm afraid that was the start of the decline, because they worked against him rather than for him. But it was basically a good car. A lot of changes were taking place. That was the trouble with emissions, because California and the federal people were changing the rules day by day. The Californian car was so underpowered, it was unbelievable, because you had to retard the ignition by 11 degrees, which really reduced the power. Had to have a single carburettor, and couldn't put an automatic gearbox in because it wouldn't have gone up the hills. And then every time they changed the legislation in California, it made it worse. You know, you got the catalyst on it anyway. You had to do more things, more sophistication. While all Datsun did was make a bigger engine. And we would not put, no one would at Triumph would look at a bigger engine. So it was doomed in California. But no, overall, I had some very good times there. And yeah, it's nice to see so many cars out here today. But I still win for the number I've used to drive one home every day to do a quality assessment. So I think I've driven over 500 of them. And I will say that not one ever let me down on my 40-mile-an-hour round trip. Thank you. If there's any questions, just let us know.
What's on the other seat up here, Ron, and then we'll get everyone up at the end.
Okay.
Well, Peter was the resident engineer. I think it was a slightly different job to what you might perceive.
I worked for engineering here at Canley Mondays and Fridays. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I was resident in Speke. It was really to address any engineering problems that occurred in production. I would say that probably about 95% of the problems which came to me were not engineering problems, they were production operative related. So it was a question of sorting them out. Speke was a very interesting place. A little in the motor industry in the Midlands, the number of things that could be obtained over the wall was quite prolific. However, the people at Speke made the people down in the Midlands look like rank amateurs, because most of them were ex-dockers. But that aside, there were many trials and tribulations with the Speke cars. There was one date in particular, it was the 4th of July 1977, Independence Day. That was the day when the TR8 Job 1 was first, the first TR8 production cars were built. There were 3 of them. There was also around 30 4-valve TR7 Sprint cars that were destined for the press garage and for preparation for press race over the road, the other side of the A45. But essentially what happened was that the sales and marketing people, in their infinite wisdom, decided that it didn't offer sufficient performance differential over the 2-valve car, which essentially didn't up to about 4,000 revs. Then it was a different animal altogether. That's the experts in sales and marketing. But anyway, so these cars lay fallow just over the other side of the road for the best part of a year. They were all well prepared for the press launch, etc. And then it was decided that, well, I've got to do something with them. I had one as a management car, which I normally would have kept for about a year, but I kept it for thick end of 2 years. I was very reluctant to let it go. It was a supercar. So that was the TR7 Sprint. Never happened, very sadly. But labour relations, you know, half the guys didn't know what they were called out on strike for. The joke at the time was, well, there weren't enough perforations in the toilet paper, so it was a good idea to have a strike over it. And the culmination of it really was, in 1978, was a long strike. We were just about to introduce the convertible into production, but it was about a 13-week-long strike. It was going nowhere. Nobody was getting any progress. Michael Edwards had been appointed to BL by Margaret Thatcher, the head of BL, what's all this business going on in Speke? If it's not resolved in a fortnight, the plant will be closed down. The local union hard man said, who does he think he is? He soon found out, a fortnight later, the Speke was closed down. We moved the TR7 to Canley. That was a bit of a disappointment. I thought it was going to be a good idea, a good thing, because effectively I got a home posting. So instead of having to up the road to Speke every week, it was just walk down the road into the plant here, just around this area where we are now. But it was a big disappointment, quite honestly. The Canley people said, we know how to build cars, and they would not build them to process. They'd do it to their own ideas. So the quality wasn't really as good as some of the Liverpool built cars. And then come 1979-80, the end of 79, it was decided to move the car to Solihull. And it was a progressive move as production ramped up at Solihull, so it wound down at Canley, and it finally finished at Canley in 1980. But the Solihull built cars originally, the original ones, were probably the best of all, because there was proper operator training on the lines, and they were only being pushed down the assembly track at the rate of about 4 or 5 an hour, while all the operators got clued up properly and put the car together as they should have been. But then Canley closed down and production ramped up at Solihull. And then we get into then engineering the TR7 TR8 UK, sorry. And that was due to be launched in 1981. But the skids were already under the sports car programme, and although about, I think there were around 30 cars, TR8 UKs, built, they were eventually sold off via Measham to selected dealers, and there's still quite a few around today. But very sadly, it was the end of the TR7 story. A great shame. It was a good car, much maligned by the press, I might add, for no particular reason. The style had something to do with it. The swooping side crease was not really liked by a lot of people, but it wasn't a bad motor car, and it's nice to see so many of them here today. Particularly, it's nice to see so many of the SJW series, registered series 4-valve cars, because they're probably the rarest of all now.
Yeah, certainly are.
Yeah.
Well, can we get Richard up here? Because he can take a seat up here. Actually, keep hold of the microphone. Peter, sit next to Ron. Richard, Peter just mentioned the side crease on the TR7. I think that's, I'll give you this in a moment, Richard. I think that's been turning up on everything ever since, hasn't it?
Excuse me. As I mentioned earlier,
Come stand here, Richard, and I'll get you on
it's my
camera.
best side.
Being live streamed, but no, it's not.
As I've said before, it was it's been said as well, very controversial. What's happened now, of course, you see lines like that, multiple lines like that, and all sorts of vehicles, which, you know, I think they look ridiculous. What Harris did was very subtle, because also in the car shape there are subtle shapes, curves. It's not just styling, it's design, and it's very nice to see that, you know, he was ahead of his time, you know, but people didn't admit that, didn't realise that, people who should have known better. Sorry, my involvement is on the interior of the car. I've been talking to various people today, and I knew Harris from early 60s. I followed Harris's job at Duple Motor Bodies, doing coaches and buses. So I met him in the early 60s. Yet when we were doing the TR7, because the way the management was, the company was, there was Longbridge styling, very professional. Then there was Canley, very amateurish in a way. And I never met Harris at all while we were doing the interior of the car. You know, it's ridiculous, but, you know, it's been well documented that about the management. It was chaotic. So everything was basically done to a budget, on a shoestring, rushed as well. And although, you know, I was pointing out today that detailed things, like in the centre console, the screws you can see, you know, it should never have happened. All sorts of things happened that was never intended. But I think it stood the test of time. But although I did the interior, it was a teamwork. There were two other guys, Ray Innes, an accomplished designer, but also David Keepax. And David spent years doing the graphics for instrumentation that are on all the cars now, aren't they? You know, his legacy. So basically that was my involvement during the interior, but I could tell similar stories like I've been told today about management and the chaos. Another thing I was involved in was colour selection, and but people said, you know, what you're choosing is all wrong. And I said, most of the cars will be going to California, you know, where the sunlight's different. And just to digress a bit, I'm the youngest of 5, the sole survivor, but I had a sister that went to the States, emigrated in 58. In 61, she ended up in California. And Bruce McWilliams, when he was over here, Vice President of Sales, said, "Richard, do you need a car when you're over there?" And I thought, yeah, not really. When I get to LA, there's a brand new TR6 there waiting for me, and which my wife and I had for 3 weeks. We had to take it back to be serviced. We did so many miles in it. But what I was going to say about servicing it, this is LA where people were buying TRs. It was like the backstreet operation, you know, it was, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it that people were, well, there was no money, was there, to invest in the servicing of it. I presume it's changed now, but, you know, it was, and the other thing about it, of course, you mentioned the 240Z earlier. We were in the TR6, and the 240Z was around, and people just said, "What the hell's this?" You know.
TR6, what the hell is this? Yeah.
And that was the problem. It was of a different generation, and it needed doing. Hence the TR7.
Well, Harris did actually have one for a year as a management car, and he said to me, I don't know if Nathan, Laura, and Hannah know this, but he said to me, didn't like the TR6. It was like driving a vintage truck. And that was Harris's summing up of the TR6, which went back after a year. But
yes, I mean, the operation was just amazing. I could not believe it, because like 80 or 90% of the cars were going to California, basically, weren't they? You know, and this is what anybody who bought a car had to deal with this.
But I think 20,000 TR7s actually stayed in Britain, so it was the biggest seller by far over here. But Richard was over there driving the TR6, and people thought it was a bit of an anachronism, didn't they?
I mean, that was the interesting thing about it, you know, this Longbridge operation and the Coventry operation, and we were submitting designs, but we never seemed to get together, you know. It was,
that sums up British Leyland, doesn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. I mean, as I said, I left when Honda was starting, but just before, and I've no regrets, because I worked on lots of different things, you know, in my time as an independent. From, I mean, this is the extreme, working independently. I did a shampoo bottle for shampoo, and did a model for JCB, a new JCB that they were doing. I did a quarter scale model for it. So you can't get a bigger contrast from a shampoo bottle to a JCB. and because of that, you know, I've no regrets of having left, although it was a difficult time sometimes, you know. Anyway.
Well, I think I'm sure there's going to be some questions, because we've really got the whole gamut here of the TR7, every aspect of it. So is there anything anyone's ever wanted to know, apart from how it was received by the press? Because I think we're all sick of that, aren't we? But has anyone got anything they'd like to ask anyone?
When Honda came in, was there any talk of actually bringing back a sports car using the Honda engineering? Bear in mind the engine implications had in California.
Okay, as far as Honda was concerned, no. The answer is no. There are a number of joint projects with Honda, started with the Acclaim. Fundamentally, a Honda rebadged the Triumph with certain interior features which were unique to the car. It was a toe in the water job as far as the collaborative engineering between Honda and Rover, and it was pretty successful. It would have been nice to have run a sports car with Honda, but they weren't really into the sports cars, other than a little thing which they brought out in the early 90s called the Honda Beat, which was a little run around Japan only. There's quite a few kicking about in this country. There were Japanese imports, but imported second-hand. So yeah, sorry, they had some superb engines and power units, but could have made a great sports car, but there we go.
Yeah, Ron Jesson again here, just to come back, see all those wonderful cars out there, and you've heard all the stories that we've told you, and they're true. I mean, to think that these cars are still running, all the aggravation we went through to build them, the comments on the design team, that they didn't speak to each other. And we at Speke showed this up at one point, that we followed British Leyland systems of quality. I was in quality, and we said all along that the left-hand side of the assembly line, quality sign-off, did not coincide with the right-hand side. And we took this to the director at the time, Jack Thomas, and we pointed this out. No, follow the systems, follow the systems. My foreman in Detox Control was an old body and white man. He was the one who organised the pickup truck. He said, why don't we show them what's wrong with the Leyland system? Took a lot of organising, because you had to start in body and white in another factory. We built a 3-door Toledo. Okay, 2 doors one side, 1 door the other side. The hardest part of the organisation was the paperwork, to try and get the sign-off sheet that 2 for 1 car. It was impossible to do through the system, but somehow we found it. So we had this car coming down, and it was completely signed off as okay. 2 doors one side, 1 door the other. We drove it round outside the quality Jack Thomas's office, and we got him to come outside to look at it. And he starts looking at the car, there's nothing wrong with this. And it was actually Potter who spotted it. He said, yeah, but there's 2 doors this side and 1 door that side. So that shows the sort of things we had to work against, you know, trying to build a quality car when the systems weren't there to enable you to do it at all times. So just a little by the side doing there for you. I think we've got a picture of it somewhere. It went to be built into another pickup truck for something.
A little question for Peter. Are you one of the prototype convertibles? Did you see any of those made, or did you have any involvement in the actual prototype?
Yeah, and the prototypes were all built locally here, and the engineering block, which was called Fletch North, was just on the corner by the traffic lights. It used to be a, what is it now? It used to be a video shop one time. It turned into, people say, oh yes, my desk was in that right-hand corner of whatever video shop it was, I can't remember. But the
Check
building.
out the Sainsbury's.
No, Sainsbury's was a little bit further back. But the convertibles, the first convertibles were in fact built at Speke. The first production ones. Yeah. What happened was that the strike was resolved, but a date was set for its closure. And the startup after the strike involved the build of the pre-production batch of convertibles, and they were built at Speke. I can't remember how many there were, but in the final wind-down programme at Speke didn't last too long, actually. It was a matter of a couple of months or so. But certainly the first line-built convertibles were built at Speke.
Well, look, I think we're out of time. So first of all, how about a round of applause for our guests?
I'd just like to say a final thank you to everybody for making a huge effort for coming along today, whether it be up in Speke, Solihull or here in Canley. And I'd like to wish you all a safe journey home and hope to see you again very soon. Thank you.
Yours was Java green, wasn't it?
It was. It was indeed. Yeah.
Takes you back a bit, eh?
Thank you. Just a touch.
Did they look as good as this when they were new, Peter, do you think?
Yeah, well, yes, they did. But don't forget, as I said, they were all prepared by the press car operation for as press cars. So they were all pretty pristine, I'll tell you now. Yeah. There were various other features that were fitted, and Lucas H4 halogen headlights as well were fitted as opposed to the standard seal beam units.
And did you used to tear up the roads in yours with that 16-valve engine?
It went well. It went well.
Yeah.
It was a nice car. Very, very sad to see it go, but in actual fact, we had to change our management cars on a fairly regular basis, like every year. And the thing was a year old when I got hold of it, but because it had been lying fallow in the press car operation for a year, it's about 14 months the paperwork come over to change the car. So I ignored it. And I ignored it several times. It came through. In the end, the car had to be MOT'd. It was 3 years old. And then I had a letter from the management car administration, and he said that participation in the scheme was a privilege and not a right, and unless you reorder forthwith, the privilege is about to be withdrawn. So I had to sort of succumb.
No, when you had a Dolomite Sprint.
Yeah. But the reality was that I had a lot of
contact with the Canley plant, and I was able to I got the Sprint put back and back and back and back on the build schedule for it. And in the end, the schedule controller, he says, we've got to build this car, you know. He says, because we're finishing production in a couple of weeks. He says, we've got to build it. So I said, yeah, all right then.
And that was how the TR7 Sprint finally went.
Yes, it was sold for £1,750.
We'll keep that tunnel is.